In a grand cathedral, a wedding unfolds with elegance until a young girl steps forward, clutching a baby, and declares the groom as its father. The revelation shatters the ceremony, but the bride's calm response unveils a deeper truth, one that will leave everyone reeling. Secrets unravel, exposing a web of betrayal and hidden motives, leading to a discovery that redefines justice. Don't miss the twists ahead. Subscribe to our channel for the latest stories and share where you're watching from in the comments. Join us as this powerful tale unfolds. The golden light of a late summer afternoon poured through the towering stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Cathedral, bathing the nave in a kaleidoscope of reds, blues, and ambers. The air was thick with the scent of white roses, their delicate petals cascading from arches woven with silk and ivy. 500 guests, New York's elite, from Wall Street titans to media moguls, filled the polished mahogany pews, their whispers a soft hum beneath the organ's gentle prelude. Camera shutters clicked like distant gunfire, capturing every detail of the event billed as the wedding of the decade. At the altar, the bride stood radiant, her ivory Vera Wang gown shimmering like a promise of forever. Her auburn hair, swept beneath a gossamer veil, caught the light, and her emerald eyes held a quiet intensity. Beside her, the groom, dashing in a tailored black tuxedo, flashed a practiced smile, though his fingers twitched at his sides, betraying a flicker of unease. The priest, Father O'Connell, raised his hands, his white robes swaying as his voice echoed through the vaulted space. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to unite this man and this woman in holy matrimony." His words carried the weight of tradition, each syllable resonating off the stone walls. The congregation leaned forward, some dabbing at tears, others craning for a better view of the couple. The bride's lips curved into a faint smile, but her gaze drifted past the groom, settling on the heavy oak doors at the far end of the cathedral. The groom shifted, his polished shoes squeaking faintly on the marble floor. Father O'Connell's voice softened as he reached the ceremonial pause. "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever, hold your peace." The words hung in the air, a ritual formality expected to pass in reverent silence. The organ's notes faded, and for a heartbeat, the cathedral was still. The only sound the faint rustle of silk as a guest adjusted her dress. Then a low groan shattered the quiet. The massive doors creaked open, letting in a shaft of blinding sunlight that sliced through the dim interior. Every head turned, gas rippling through the crowd like wind through tall grass. A petite figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, her shadow stretching long across the aisle. She was young, no more than 15, her dark curls tangled and her face pale, streaked with tears. In her trembling arms, wrapped in a soft pink blanket, was a newborn, its tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The girl's eyes, wide and haunted, locked onto the groom, and the cathedral seemed to hold its breath. Her voice, though quivering, rang out with a clarity that pierced the stunned silence. "Everyone needs to know." She took a shaky step forward, clutching the baby tighter. "This child is mine, and the groom is her father." The words detonated like a bomb. The congregation erupted in murmurs, a wave of shock rolling from the front pews to the back. A reporter in the third row scribbled furiously, her pen nearly tearing the paper. A senator's wife clutched her pearls, her mouth agape. The groom's face drained of color, his jaw tightening as he stumbled over his words. That's absurd," he stammered, turning to the guest with outstretched hands. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." His voice cracked, betraying a desperation that only fueled the crowd's whispers. Cameras flashed, their lenses trained on the unfolding drama. The bride remained still, her bouquet of lilies and roses clutched so tightly that a thorn pricked her finger, a tiny bead of red blooming against her white glove. Her expression was unreadable, neither panicked nor broken, as if she had been expecting this moment. She turned slowly to the girl, her younger sister, whose condition made public speaking a rare and painful act. The girl's courage was palpable, her slight frame trembling but resolute. The baby in her arms a silent testament to the truth she carried. The groom's mother, seated in the front pew, half rose, one hand pressed to her chest. "This is outrageous," she hissed, her diamond necklace glinting as she glared at the girl. The groom's father, a towering figure in a bespoke suit, remained seated, but his knuckles whitened around the armrest, his eyes narrowing. The priest, caught off guard, fumbled with his prayer book, looking between the couple and the girl as if hoping for divine intervention. The bride's voice cut through the chaos, calm and measured, like the eye of a hurricane. "Would you like to explain?" she said, her gaze locking onto the groom. "Or should she continue?" The question was a blade, sharp and precise, and the groom flinched as if struck. His mouth opened, but no words came, only a strangled sound that echoed in the cavernous space. The crowd leaned in, sensing the weight of secrets about to spill. The girl took another step, her sneakers scuffing against the marble. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper that seemed to reverberate off the vaulted ceiling. "He told me it was for my health," she said, her voice breaking but defiant. "He said it would make me special. But it wasn't true." Tears welled in her eyes, but she held the groom's gaze, her fear giving way to a fierce determination. The guests were frozen, some clutching their programs, others whispering theories to their neighbors. A news anchor in the back row signaled her cameraman to zoom in, sensing a story that would dominate headlines. The bride's mother, seated near the front, gripped the pew, her face pale but her eyes blazing with a mix of grief and pride. She knew her youngest daughter's struggle, the way the world's noise could overwhelm her. Yet here she stood, bearing her soul to a room of strangers. The bride reached out, her hand hovering near her sister's shoulder, a silent gesture of strength. The connection between them was electric, a bond forged through years of love and protection. The groom's protest grew weaker, his hands raised in a futile attempt to deflect the accusation. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted, his voice rising. "She's not well, you all know that." But his words fell flat, drowned by the weight of the girl's presence and the undeniable truth in her arms. The baby's tiny hand reached out, grasping at the air, and for a moment the cathedral seemed to pause, as if the child herself demanded to be heard. The bride stepped forward, her gown rustling softly. She raised the bouquet slightly, revealing a small USB drive sewn into the satin ribbon, its presence unnoticed until now. Her eyes met the groom's, and for the first time, a faint smile curved her lips, not one of joy, but of resolve. "You've had your chance," she said, her voice carrying to the back of the cathedral. "Now it's mine." The guests held their breath, sensing the story was far from over. The bride's calm was no longer just composure. It was the quiet strength of someone who had uncovered a truth too devastating to ignore. The girl stood firm, her baby cradled close, a beacon of courage in a sea of shock. The cathedral, with its ancient stones and sacred vows, had become a stage for a reckoning, one that would unravel not just a wedding, but an empire of lies. As the organ remained silent, the moment stretched, heavy with the promise of revelations yet to come. Dear listeners, if this story has gripped your heart, subscribe to our channel to catch every twist in this unforgettable tale. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments below. Your support fuels our storytelling. Stay with us, for the truth is only beginning to unfold. The Brooklyn apartment was a sanctuary of soft light and warm comfort, its walls lined with bookshelves that sagged under the weight of psychology journals and dog-eared novels. A late autumn breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the distant hum of city traffic and the faint scent of rain-soaked asphalt. The woman sat at her cluttered desk, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, a steaming mug of chamomile tea forgotten beside her laptop. Her emerald eyes, sharp with focus, scanned a spreadsheet of wedding expenses, floral arrangements, catering, venue deposits, until a single line caught her attention. A $50,000 transfer labeled consulting fee to a company called Genix Solutions. Her brow furrowed. She'd never heard of it, and the groom, her fiancé, hadn't mentioned it. 6 months before the cathedral's chaos, the woman was a rising star in trauma psychology, her research on adolescent resilience earning her accolades across New York's academic circles. But tonight, in the quiet of her apartment, she was simply a sister, a daughter, and a fiancé wrestling with a nagging unease. The glow of her laptop cast shadows across her face as she clicked deeper into the groom's cloud account, her fingers hesitating only briefly. She wasn't one to snoop, but the transfer felt wrong. like a discordant note in a familiar melody. Genix Solutions had no website, no public records, only a cryptic offshore account tied to a string of transactions that vanished into a maze of shell companies. Her thoughts drifted to her father, a journalist whose relentless pursuit of truth had made him both a hero and a ghost in her life. He died 10 years ago, his car plunging off a rain-slicked bridge while investigating the Groom's family empire, a biotech juggernaut with tentacles in global health policy. The official report called it an accident, but her father's colleagues whispered of foul play. He'd left behind a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with cryptic shorthand and warnings about Genix. She'd tucked it away in a drawer, unable to face its weight, but now as her cursor hovered over another encrypted file, the notebook's shadow loomed large. The woman rose, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, and retrieved the notebook from a locked box beneath her bed. Its cover was worn, the edges frayed from years of handling. She flipped to a page marked with a single word, Genix. Beneath it, her father's tight scrawl read, "Follow the money, protect them." Her heart quickened. Protect who? Her mother, frail but fierce, still grieved his loss. Her sister, a 15-year-old with a mind that danced to its rhythm, had been her anchor through the years of mourning. The thought of them in danger tightened her chest. She returned to her laptop, her therapist's instincts kicking in. Patterns revealed truth. She knew. Small tells in behavior, inconsistencies in stories. The groom had been distant lately, his late nights at the office piling up, his excuses polished but thin. She'd chalked it up to wedding stress, but now as she cross-referenced the Genix payments with his calendar, a timeline emerged. Each transfer coincided with urgent business trips he'd taken alone, leaving her to plan their future. Her fingers trembled as she typed Genix Solutions into a secure database, one she'd accessed through a colleague at NYU. The results were sparse, a single mention in a whistleblower form linking Genix to unlisted clinical trials and bioethics violations. The apartment's silence was broken by the buzz of her phone, a text from her sister. "Can you call? Feeling weird." The woman's pulse spiked. Her sister rarely reached out after 9, her evenings spent sketching or lost in music to soothe her sensory overload. She dialed immediately, her voice soft but steady. "Hey, what's going on?" The girl's reply was halting, her words tangled with anxiety. "I don't know. Just, Mom's asleep, and I keep thinking about stuff." The woman pressed gently, her training guiding her. "What kind of stuff?" A long pause, then a whisper. "I saw him at school. He said not to tell you." The woman's blood ran cold. "Who?" she asked, though a part of her already knew. "Your fiancé," the girl mumbled. "He was talking to my counselor. It was weird." The woman's mind raced. The groom had no reason to visit her sister's school, a specialized academy for neurodivergent teens. She kept her tone calm, reassuring. "It's okay. I'll figure it out. Get some rest, all right?" The call ended, but the unease settled like a stone in her stomach. She turned back to the notebook, flipping to a later entry. Her father's handwriting grew frantic. Genix isn't just funding, it's a front. Trials on vulnerable populations. They're untouchable unless you find the source. The word untouchable was underlined twice, a warning etched in ink. She leaned back, the chair creaking under her weight. Her father had been chasing this truth when he died, and now it seemed the truth was chasing her. The next morning, she sat across from her mother in a cozy diner near Prospect Park, the clink of coffee cups and the murmur of conversation a comforting backdrop. Her mother's graying hair was pulled into a neat bun, her eyes carrying the weight of years spent rebuilding after loss. "You're quiet today," her mother said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Wedding jitters?" The woman forced a smile. "Something like that." She hesitated, then asked, "Did Dad ever talk about Genix?" Her mother's spoon froze mid-stir, her face paling. "Where did you hear that name?" The woman recounted the spreadsheet, the payments, and the notebook. Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your father said Genix was dangerous. He told me to keep you and your sister close if anything happened to him." The diner's warmth couldn't dispel the chill that crept up her spine. She thought of her sister's text, the groom's unexplained visit to her school. Her sister had been different lately, wearing oversized hoodies, skipping art club, and avoiding eye contact even more than usual. The woman had attributed it to teenage moods, but now each detail felt like a breadcrumb, leading to something darker. She paid the check, her mind already mapping her next steps. She needed answers, and she needed them before the wedding. Back in her apartment, she opened her laptop and began digging deeper, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She cross-referenced Genix's transactions with public records, finding a pattern of payments to medical facilities in low-income areas. A memory surfaced. Her father's late-night calls with sources, his voice low as he spoke of experiments and cover-ups. She pulled up a photo of him from her desk drawer, his kind eyes and crooked smile a reminder of his sacrifice. "What were you chasing, Dad?" she whispered. The phone buzzed again, this time a call from her best friend, a tech analyst with a knack for uncovering digital footprints. "I ran that name you gave me," he said, his voice tense. "Genix is bad news, linked to offshore accounts in a biotech firm that your fiancé's family owns. There's chatter about human trials, but it's buried deep. Be careful." The line went dead, and the woman stared at the notebook, her father's words burning in her mind. Protect them. She stood, her resolve hardening. The wedding was 6 months away, but the truth couldn't wait. Dear listeners, if this mystery has you on edge, subscribe to our channel for every heart-pounding moment to come. Share where you're tuning in from below. Your support keeps these stories alive. The trail is heating up, and the woman is ready to follow it, no matter the cost. The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the windows of the Brooklyn brownstone where the woman lived. Inside, the living room was a cocoon of warmth, lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. The woman knelt beside her 15-year-old sister, whose dark curls spilled over a faded quilt. The girl's face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and her hands clutched the hem of an oversized hoodie that hung loose on her slight frame. The air was heavy with unspoken pain, the kind that clung to the walls like damp rot. 3 months before the wedding that would shatter a cathedral's sanctity, the woman, a psychologist whose name carried weight in trauma research, faced a truth that threatened to break her. The girl's voice was barely a whisper, trembling as she spoke. "I didn't want to tell you," she said, her words halting, shaped by the unique cadence of her mind. "I thought you'd be mad." The woman's heart clenched, but she kept her expression steady, her training anchoring her. "I could never be mad at you," she said, brushing a curl from her sister's face. "Just tell me what happened." The girl's eyes darted to the corner of the room, where her sketchbook lay open, its pages filled with jagged lines and shadowed figures. "It was him," she mumbled. "Your fiancé. He said it was a secret." The woman's breath caught, her mind flashing to the cryptic financial transfers she'd uncovered weeks ago, the name Genix Solutions searing itself into her memory. Her fiancé's late nights, his unexplained visit to her sister's school, and her father's notebook warning of a biotech empire's sins, they were threads in a tapestry she was only beginning to unravel. But this, her sister's trembling confession, was a blade to the heart. She took the girl's hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Start from the beginning. I'm here." The story spilled out in fragments, each word a wound. 3 months earlier, while the woman was in Boston for a research sabbatical, her fiancé had approached the girl at her school, his charm disarming her defenses. He'd spoken of a special program run by his family's foundation, one that would help her feel stronger. The girl, whose world was often a cacophony of sensory overload, trusted him. He drove her to a sleek medical facility in Queens, its sterile halls lined with locked doors. There, nurses in crisp uniforms drew her blood, gave her injections, and asked questions she didn't understand. "They said it was for my health," she whispered, her fingers twisting the quilt. "But it hurt. And then I started feeling sick." The woman's pulse thundered in her ears, but she kept her face calm, her therapist's mask a shield against the rage boiling within. She thought of her sister's recent changes, the hoodies, the missed art classes, the way she'd flinched at loud noises more than usual. She'd attributed it to adolescence, to the girl's condition, but now the pieces snapped into place with sickening clarity. "Did they tell you what they were doing?" she asked. The girl shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. He said it was a surprise for you, for the wedding. The lie was a poison, and the woman felt it burn through her veins. She stood pacing to the window, the rain blurring the street lights into smears of gold. She needed to know more, to confirm the unthinkable. I'm taking you to see someone tomorrow, she said, turning back to her sister. A doctor, I trust. Is that okay? The girl nodded, her shoulders slumping with relief, as if sharing the secret had lifted a fraction of its weight. The next morning, the woman drove her sister to a small pediatric clinic in Manhattan, its waiting room filled with colorful murals and the hum of a fish tank. Dr. Elena Ruiz, a longtime colleague, greeted them with a warm smile that faltered when she saw the girl's pallor. In the exam room, the woman sat by her sister's side, her hand a steady anchor as Dr. Ruiz conducted a gentle examination. The girl stared at the ceiling, her fingers tapping a silent rhythm, a coping mechanism for the chaos in her mind. After a series of tests, Dr. Ruiz stepped into the hall, motioning the woman to follow. She's 5 months pregnant, the doctor said, her voice low, her eyes heavy with concern. The words hit like a physical blow, stealing the woman's breath. There's more, Dr. Ruiz continued, handing her a file. Her blood work shows traces of experimental compounds, not standard prenatal care. I've seen this before in cases tied to unregulated trials. Whoever did this wasn't just careless. They were deliberate. The woman's vision swam, but she forced herself to focus, flipping through the file. The compounds were linked to genetic manipulation, the kind banned in ethical medicine, but rumored in the shadows of biotech. Her fiancé's family, with their vast resources and political clout, had the means to orchestrate such a horror. She thought of her father's notebook, its warning about Genix's trials on vulnerable populations. Her sister, with her trusting heart and fragile resilience, had been their perfect target. Back in the exam room, the woman knelt before her sister, who was now clutching a paper gown. You're so brave, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We're going to fix this, I promise. The girl's eyes searched hers, a flicker of hope breaking through the fear. Will the baby be okay? She asked. The woman nodded, though her heart ached with uncertainty. We'll make sure of it. That evening, the woman sat in her apartment, the rain now a steady roar outside. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Michael Reed, a retired FBI investigator who'd been her father's confidant. His gruff voice answered, tinged with surprise. It's been a while, he said. She wasted no time recounting the Genix payments, her sister's ordeal, and the blood work. I need to know what I'm up against, she said. Michael's silence was heavy. Then he spoke. Your father was onto something big. The family you're marrying into, they're untouchable, or so they think. Genix is a front for human experiments, and they've got friends in high places. Send me everything you have. She emailed the financial records in Dr. Ruiz's report, her hands shaking as she typed. The weight of her sister's pain, her father's death, and her fiancé's betrayal pressed against her, but she refused to crumble. She opened her father's notebook, its pages a map of his final days. A new entry caught her eye, written in haste. They target the vulnerable, schools, clinics, and foster care. Stop them before they reach her. The word her was circled, and the woman's throat tightened. Her sister was the target, and she'd been too blind to see it. The phone buzzed with a text from her fiancé. Dinner tomorrow? Missed you. The words, once a comfort, now felt like a snake's hiss. She typed back, sure, 7 p.m., her fingers steady despite the storm in her chest. She needed to play the part, to keep him close until she had enough to destroy him. The woman stood, her reflection in the rain-streaked window, a portrait of resolve. Her sister slept down the hall, the baby's heartbeat a quiet promise of life amid the darkness. Dear listeners, if this tale of courage and betrayal has you gripped, subscribe to our channel for every pulse-pounding twist. Share where you're joining us from in the comments. Your voices fuel this journey. The woman's fight is just beginning, and the truth is closer than she knows. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a jagged crown against the twilight, its lights reflecting off the glass facade of the Blackwell Foundation's headquarters. Inside, the woman moved through the marble lobby, her heels clicking softly, a visitor's badge pinned to her blazer. She was a shadow in the lion's den, her auburn hair tucked beneath a scarf, her emerald eyes scanning for any sign of recognition. 2 months before the wedding that would unravel an empire, she was no longer just a psychologist or a fiancée. She was a hunter, chasing the truth that had cost her father his life and her sister her innocence. The elevator hummed as it carried her to the 42nd floor, where a charity gala buzzed with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of New York's elite. She'd secured an invitation through a colleague, a flimsy pretext to infiltrate the heart of her fiancé's family empire. Her purse held a thumb drive with encrypted files, a gift from Michael Reed, the retired FBI investigator now aiding her quest. The files hinted at Genix Solutions' dark purpose, but she needed more proof that would stand up in court, proof that would protect her sister and the unborn child she carried. The gala was a masquerade of philanthropy, its guests draped in designer gowns and tailored suits, their laughter a veneer over the rot beneath. The woman slipped through the crowd, her smile a practiced mask as she nodded at passing faces. Her fiancé was across the room, his tuxedo impeccable, his charm disarming a senator's wife. He hadn't noticed her yet, and she intended to keep it that way. Her target was a woman named Sarah Klein, a former Blackwell Foundation scientist who'd reached out anonymously after Michael traced her through whistleblower forms. Sarah waited in a dimly lit corner, her graying hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "You're her, aren't you?" Sarah whispered as the woman approached, her voice barely audible over the string quartet. "The one asking about Genix." The woman nodded, sliding into the seat beside her. "I need to know what they're doing," she said, her tone low but urgent. "My sister. She's one of their victims." Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched her clutch purse, her knuckles white. "I worked for them for 15 years, she began, her voice cracking. "Genix isn't a company. It's a front. They collect genetic material from vulnerable people, teens, foster kids, and low-income families. They run trials to engineer perfect children for wealthy clients. The mothers, they're disposable. Some don't survive." Her words were a gut punch, and the woman's breath hitched, her sister's face flashing in her mind. "How do they get away with it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nausea rising in her throat. Sarah leaned closer, her eyes haunted. "Money? Power. They bribe regulators, falsify records, and eliminate threats. Your father, he got too close." The woman's heart stuttered. Her father's death, ruled an accident, had always carried a shadow of doubt. Sarah pulled a folded document from her purse, sliding it across the table. "This is all I could save before I left. Medical reports, payment logs, emails. It's not enough to bring them down, but it's a start." The woman unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the text. The reports detailed coerced pregnancies, experimental drugs, and terminations of non-compliant subjects. One email from her fiancé's father to an unknown recipient chilled her blood. "Dispose of any loose ends before the merger. No mistakes." The date matched her father's accident. She folded the document, slipping it into her purse, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. "There's more," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your fiancé, he oversees the trials. He's not just complicit, he's the architect." The words were a blade, slicing through the last threads of doubt. The woman thought of her sister's confession, the pain in her eyes as she described the special program her fiancé had lured her into. The betrayal was a living thing, clawing at her heart, but she pushed it down, her resolve hardening. "Where are the rest of the records?" she asked. Sarah shook her head. "Locked in their secure server, top floor. Only the inner circle has access." "I'm sorry, I can't help you there." Before the woman could press further, a shadow fell over the table. Her fiancé's voice, smooth as silk, cut through the air. "Enjoying the party?" She turned, her smile automatic, her pulse racing. "Just catching up," she said, gesturing to Sarah, who'd gone pale. He nodded, his eyes lingering on Sarah a moment too long before returning to the woman. "Mind if I steal you for a dance?" His charm was a mask, but she saw the suspicion beneath it. She rose, taking his arm, her skin crawling at his touch. As they moved to the dance floor, Sarah slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. The dance was a performance, each step a lie. He pulled her close, his breath warm against her ear. "You've been busy," he murmured, his tone light but probing. "Everything okay?" She met his gaze, her smile unwavering. "Just wedding stress," she lied, her voice as smooth as his. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying Sarah's words, the document burning a hole in her purse. The music swelled, and she let him lead, her body moving on autopilot while her thoughts raced. She needed that server, and she needed it before he suspected her. Later that night, in a dimly lit coffee shop far from Manhattan's glitter, the woman met Michael Reed. The retired investigator's face was weathered, his eyes sharp despite the late hour. She handed him the document, recounting Sarah's revelations. "They're monsters," she said, her voice low but fierce. Michael scanned the pages, his jaw tightening. "This confirms what your father suspected," he said. "Genix is a machine. Hundreds of victims, decades of cover-ups. Your fiance's family has senators and judges in their pocket. We need hard evidence, something undeniable." The woman nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her father's notebook, which she'd brought along. A new entry caught her eye, written in his frantic scrawl. "They hide in plain sight. Clinics are their hunting ground." She thought of her sister, targeted at her school, her vulnerability exploited. "I'll get into that server," she said, her voice resolute. Michael's eyes softened, a rare crack in his gruff exterior. "You're your father's daughter," he said. "But be careful. They've killed before." As she left the coffee shop, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Cancel the wedding, or you'll end up like him." The words were a cold fist around her heart, but she deleted the message, her jaw set. She thought of her sister, curled up at home, the baby growing inside her, a symbol of both pain and hope. The wedding was 2 months away, and the clock was ticking. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the streetlights. The woman walked home, her scarf pulled tight, her mind a battlefield of fear and determination. Dear listeners, if this web of deceit has you hooked, subscribe to our channel for every heart-stopping revelation. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your support lights the way. The woman's hunt is far from over, and the truth is a dangerous prey. The city pulsed with the restless energy of a late winter night, its neon lights bleeding into the mist that hung over Brooklyn's streets. Inside her apartment, the woman stood before a corkboard, pinned with documents, photographs, and red string connecting a web of secrets. Her auburn hair was tied back, her emerald eyes burning with a fire that hadn't dimmed despite sleepless nights. 1 month remained until the wedding that would either cement her facade or topple an empire. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and the faint hum of her laptop, its screen glowing with encrypted emails from Michael Reed, the retired FBI investigator who'd become her ally. Her sister's sketchbook lay open on the couch, its pages filled with soft pastels, a reminder of the girl she was fighting for. The woman's fingers traced a grainy photo of her fiance's father, a titan of biotech whose smile masked a predator's heart. Beside it, a medical report detailed the experimental compounds found in her sister's blood, a chilling echo of the Genix Solutions trial Sarah Klein had exposed. The truth was a monster, its tentacles reaching from her sister's pain to their father's death a decade ago. The woman had vowed to protect her sister, to honor her father's sacrifice, and tonight her plan was taking shape, a trap to be sprung in the cathedral before 500 witnesses and the glare of news cameras. She crossed to her desk, where a small black device sat beside her father's notebook. It was an AV transmitter, a gift from Rachel Torres, a journalist whose exposés had toppled corrupt officials. Rachel had agreed to help, her hunger for justice matching the woman's own. The plan was audacious: infiltrate the cathedral's audiovisual system, broadcast Genix's crimes during the ceremony, and signal Michael's FBI contacts to move in. But the linchpin was her sister, whose courage would ignite the reckoning. The woman's heart ached at the thought. Her sister, so fragile yet so fierce, had agreed to face the crowd, to name her abuser and claim her truth. The apartment door creaked open, and her sister stepped inside, her oversized hoodie dwarfing her frame. Her dark curls framed a face still pale, but lit with a new resolve. "I practiced again," the girl said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I can do it." The woman knelt before her, taking her hands. "You're stronger than anyone I know," she said, her voice thick with pride. They'd spent weeks in quiet sessions, the woman using her psychology training to help her sister navigate the fear of speaking publicly. Each word, each breath, was a victory over the trauma inflicted by the man the woman had once loved. She led her sister to the couch, opening a notebook filled with their script. "When the priest asks for objections," she said, "you walk in. You said exactly what we practiced. I'll handle the rest." The girl nodded, her fingers tapping a rhythm on her knee, a soothing ritual. "What if I freeze?" she asked, her eyes searching her sister's. The woman smiled, brushing a curl from her face. "You won't. You're carrying her truth." She glanced at her sister's stomach, where the baby, due soon, represented both pain and hope. The plan hinged on timing. Rachel had secured access to the cathedral's control room, posing as a media consultant. The USB drive, now sewn into the woman's wedding gown, held financial records, medical reports, and emails, enough to indict the groom's family. Michael's FBI team would be stationed nearby, ready to act when the evidence aired. But the woman knew the risks. Her fiancé was growing suspicious, his texts more frequent, his questions sharper. "Busy day?" He'd written that morning, a casual probe that felt like a hook. She'd replied with a heart emoji, her fingers cold as she typed. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Michael, his weathered face etched with urgency. "We've got a problem," he said, stepping inside. He spread a map of the cathedral on her table, pointing to the exits. "Their security team's been sniffing around. They know someone's digging." The woman's stomach tightened. "Do they know it's me?" Michael shook his head. "Not yet, but your fiancé's father met with a fixer yesterday, a guy who handles problems. We need to move fast." She nodded, her mind racing. The fixer was a ghost from her father's notes, a name linked to accidents like the one that killed him. She opened his notebook, finding a scrawled entry. "The fixer works off-site. Server room, 42nd floor. That's the key." Her eyes met Michael's. "The secure server Sarah mentioned? It's our best shot. If I can get in, we'll have everything." Michael's jaw tightened. "It's a fortress. You'd need their access codes." She thought of her fiancé's office, the late nights he spent there. "I'll find a way," she said, her voice steel. The next day, she visited her mother at their family home in Queens, its walls filled with memories of her father. Her mother was kneading dough for bread, her hands steady despite the grief that lingered in her eyes. "You're carrying too much," her mother said, wiping flour on her apron. The woman hesitated, then showed her the notebook, its pages a testament to her father's fight. "He knew about Genix," she said. "He died for it." Her mother's face crumpled, but she nodded. "He always said you'd finish what he started. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Your sister needs you." That night, the woman rifled through her fiancé's briefcase while he showered, her heart pounding as she photographed his keycard and memorized his laptop password. The betrayal stung, but her sister's face steeled her resolve. She found a file labeled Genix Protocol, its contents locked behind encryption. She sent it to Rachel, who promised to crack it. As the shower stopped, she slipped the briefcase back, her pulse racing. He emerged, towel around his waist, his smile too perfect. "Early night?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Just tired," she lied, her voice smooth as glass. The phone buzzed later, Rachel's voice crackling with excitement. "The file's a goldmine. Trial data, victim names, payoffs. But there's a DNA report with your name on it." The woman froze, her father's warnings echoing. Protect them. Was she more than a bystander in this nightmare? She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the plan. The wedding was her stage, her sister her spark, and the truth her weapon. She stood at her window, the city's pulse a distant drumbeat. Her sister slept down the hall, her soft snores a reminder of what was at stake. The woman clutched her father's notebook, its final line a beacon. Truth is the only cure. Dear listeners, if this tale of bravery and betrayal has you riveted, subscribe to our channel for every pulse-pounding twist. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your support fuels this fight. The woman's plan is set, but the shadows are closing in, and time is running out. The air in St. Patrick's Cathedral was electric, charged with the weight of a moment poised to shatter. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across the marble floor. But the warmth did little to thaw the chill that had settled over the 500 guests. White roses trembled in their arches, as if sensing the storm brewing beneath the ceremony's elegance. The bride stood at the altar, her ivory gown a stark contrast to the fire in her emerald eyes. Her auburn hair gleamed beneath her veil, and her hands clutched a bouquet laced with a hidden USB drive, a weapon more potent than any vow. Beside her, the groom's practiced smile faltered, his tuxedo-clad frame rigid as the echo of the girl's accusation lingered. Moments ago, the bride's 15-year-old sister, fragile yet fierce, had stormed the aisle, a newborn cradled in her arms, her voice slicing through the silence. "This child is mine, and the groom is her father." The congregation was a sea of stunned faces, senators, media tycoons, and socialites frozen in their pews, their whispers rising like a tide. Camera flashes erupted, capturing the groom's ashen face as he stammered, "This is a lie. She's not well." His words were desperate, but they crumbled against the girl's unwavering gaze, her dark curls framing a face streaked with tears, but blazing with truth. The bride's mother, seated in the front, gripped the pew, her eyes wet with pride and pain. The priest, Father O'Connell, stood motionless, his prayer book forgotten, as the cathedral became a crucible for secrets long buried. The bride's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unyielding. "Would you like to explain," she said, turning to the groom, "or should she continue?" Her words were a blade, and he flinched, his hands twitching as if searching for an escape. The crowd leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. The girl stepped closer, her sneakers scuffing the marble, the baby stirring with a soft whimper that seemed to echo the cathedral's held breath. "He lied to me," she said, her voice breaking but resolute. "He said it was for my health, but it hurt. He hurt me." Her accusation was a spark, igniting the tinder of the guest's shock into a roar of murmurs. The groom's father, a towering figure in the front pew, rose, his bespoke suit pristine, but his face a mask of barely contained fury. "This is an outrage," he barked, his voice booming. "Control your sister." But the bride ignored him, her gaze locked on her fiancé. She raised her bouquet, revealing the USB drive, its sleek black surface catching the light. "You've had your chance," she said, her voice carrying to the rafters. "Now it's mine." With a subtle nod, she signaled to the shadows, where Rachel Torres, the journalist, waited in the cathedral's control room. A screen behind the altar flickered to life, its glow silencing the crowd. Gasps rippled as financial records scrolled across it, offshore accounts, payments to Genix Solutions, a shell company tied to the groom's family. Medical reports followed, detailing coerced pregnancies and experimental drugs, the same compounds found in the girl's blood. An email, stark and damning, appeared. "Dispose of non-compliant subjects discreetly," signed by the groom's father. The cathedral erupted, reporters scribbling, cameras zooming, as the elite realized they were witnessing the fall of an empire. The bride stepped forward, her gown rustling like a battle flag. "For years," she said, her voice steady but laced with fire, "this family has preyed on the vulnerable. They targeted my sister, used her for their experiments, and thought they could silence her." She gestured to the girl, who stood tall, the baby cradled close. They were wrong. The girl's eyes met hers, a silent vow passing between them. The bride continued, her words a gavel. "They ran Genix Solutions, a front for illegal trials, forcing young girls into pregnancies for profit. They covered their tracks with bribes, threats, and murder, including my father's." The mention of her father, a journalist killed a decade ago, sent a hush through the crowd. The screen flashed to a police report, buried until now, confirming his accident was sabotage. The groom's father lunged toward the aisle, his face purple. "This is slander," he roared, but his protest was drowned by the cathedral doors bursting open. FBI agents, led by Michael Reed, stormed in, their badges glinting under the chandeliers. "Edward Blackwell, you're under arrest," Michael barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Agents swarmed the patriarch, cuffing his wrists as he sputtered, his power crumbling before the cameras. The groom bolted for a side exit, his polished shoes slipping on the marble. "Stop him!" Michael shouted, and two agents tackled him, pinning him to the ground. His cries of innocence were feeble, swallowed by the crowd's clamor. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, their live feeds broadcasting the scene to millions. The bride stood unmoved, her sister at her side, the baby a quiet testament to their courage. The girl's hand found hers and the bride squeezed it, a silent promise kept. She turned to the guests, her voice rising above the din. "This isn't just about one family," she said. "It's about every victim they silenced, every life they stole. Today, we take back the truth." The screen looped the evidence, each document a nail in the coffin of the Blackwell Empire. The groom's mother, seated in the front, wept silently, her diamonds glinting as she buried her face in her hands. The elite, once allies, shrank in their seats, their complicity exposed. Michael approached the bride, his weathered face softening. "We've got enough to bury them," he said, nodding toward the cuffed men. "You did it." She shook her head, gesturing to her sister. "We did it." The girl's lips trembled into a smile, her strength a beacon in the storm. The baby cooed, her tiny hand grasping the girl's finger, and for a moment, the cathedral's chaos faded, leaving only the bond between sisters. The agents led the groom and his father out, their heads bowed under the weight of their crimes. The crowd parted, some shouting, others staring in stunned silence. The bride watched them go, her heart a battlefield of grief and triumph. Her fiancé's betrayal, her sister's pain, her father's sacrifice. They had led to this moment, a reckoning broadcast to the world. But she knew one truth remained, a secret buried in her father's notebook, waiting to redefine her fight. As the cathedral emptied, reporters swarmed the bride, their microphones thrusting forward. She raised a hand, her voice calm. "The story's not over," she said, her eyes meeting Rachel's camera. "But today, justice begins." The girl stood beside her, the baby cradled close, their silhouettes framed by the altar's glow, a tableau of resilience against a crumbling dynasty. Dear listeners, if this explosion of truth has you on edge, subscribe to our channel for every heart-wrenching twist. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your support drives this saga forward. The bride's victory is only the beginning, and a deeper secret looms, ready to change everything. The echoes of chaos still lingered in St. Patrick's Cathedral, though the heavy oak doors had swung shut behind the last of the departing guests. The once pristine nave was now a battlefield of scattered programs and wilting rose petals, the air thick with the aftertaste of betrayal and justice. The bride stood alone at the altar, her ivory gown stained with the faintest smudge of ink from her bouquet's hidden USB drive, now empty of its secrets but heavy with consequence. Her auburn hair, loosened from its elegant updo, framed a face etched with resolve, her emerald eyes reflecting the dying light of the stained glass windows. Moments ago, her sister's courage and her own calculated strike had toppled a biotech empire, sending the groom and his father away in handcuffs. Yet as the cathedral's silence pressed against her, she knew one final truth waited, a secret that would rewrite her past and redefine her future. The creak of a pew drew her gaze. Her mother approached, her graying hair catching the soft glow of a chandelier, her face a map of grief and pride. "You did what your father couldn't," she said, her voice trembling but warm. The bride's lips parted, but no words came, only a quiet ache for the man whose notebook had guided her here. Her sister, still clutching the newborn, joined them, her dark curls framing a face that had faced a cathedral of strangers and emerged unbroken. The baby cooed, her tiny hand grasping at the air, a beacon of hope amid the wreckage. The bride knelt, brushing a tear from her sister's cheek. "You were so brave," she whispered, her voice thick with love. She reached into her gown's hidden pocket, retrieving her father's leather-bound notebook, its edges worn from years of secrets. A single page, folded and tucked inside, had haunted her since Rachel, the journalist, uncovered it in a safety deposit box her father had left behind. It was a DNA report, its stark lines hinting at a truth she'd glimpsed but hadn't dared face. She turned to the congregation's remnants, reporters lingering with cameras, FBI agents conferring in hushed tones, and a few loyal friends who'd stayed. There's one more thing you need to know, she said, her voice carrying through the vaulted space, steady despite the tremor in her hands. She unfolded the report, its paper crisp against her fingers. 10 years ago, my father died chasing the truth about Genix Solutions, she began, her gaze sweeping the room. He wasn't just a journalist. He was protecting me. Murmurs rippled through the reporters, their pens poised. She held up the document, its text visible in the altar's light. This is a DNA report from 1997, the year I was born. It proves I was the first success of Genix experiments. A child engineered for their clients, taken from an unknown mother. The words hung heavy, and her mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The bride's voice wavered but pressed on. My father found me through adoption records, buried under layers of lies. He and my mother raised me as their own, shielding me from the family I was meant to serve. She glanced at her mother, whose eyes glistened with tears. He knew what they were capable of. He died to keep me free. The cathedral was silent, save for the soft rustle of a reporter's notebook. The bride's sister stepped closer, her baby cradled tight, her presence a grounding force. Flashbacks flickered in the bride's mind. Her father's late-night whispers, his fierce protectiveness, the way he'd linger at her school plays, as if memorizing her. She'd thought it was love, and it was, but it was also vigilance, a guard against the predators who'd created her. The notebook's final entry, scrawled in haste, burned in her memory. Truth is the only cure. She's safe for now. She'd been the daughter he'd saved from a fate worse than death. She turned to the reporters, her voice rising with conviction. Genix didn't just target my sister. They built an empire on stolen lives, starting with mine. Today, we end their silence. Rachel, stationed near the altar with her camera crew, nodded, her live feed broadcasting the bride's words to millions. The screen behind the altar, still active, flashed to a new document, an adoption record linking the bride to Genix's first trial, signed by the groom's father himself. The crowd gasped, cameras zooming in, as the full weight of the revelation sank in. Michael Reed, the FBI investigator, approached, his weathered face softening. "We've got warrants for their entire network," he said, his voice low. "Your father's evidence, your sister's testimony, it's enough to dismantle them." The bride nodded, but her eyes lingered on her sister, whose quiet strength had sparked this fire. "It's not just about them," she said. "It's about every victim still out there." Her mother stepped forward, her hands trembling as she took the bride's. "I always knew you were special," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not because of what they did, but because of who you are." The bride's throat tightened, and she embraced her mother, the notebook pressed between them. She thought of her father's sacrifice, the years he'd spent tracking Genix, knowing his daughter was their creation, yet loving her as his own. A reporter, emboldened, called out, "What's next?" The bride turned, her gown catching the light like a warrior's armor. "We find the others," she said, her voice resolute. "Every child, every mother, every life they stole. This isn't the end. It's the beginning." The reporters scribbled furiously, their questions a chorus, but she raised a hand, silencing them. "My father died for this truth. My sister fought for it. Now we all carry it forward." Rachel approached, her camera still rolling. "The story's breaking nationwide," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Survivors are already coming forward." The bride nodded, her mind racing. The groom's family was in custody, but their network, bribes, fixers, complicit officials, remained a shadow to be chased. She thought of the DNA report, its unanswered questions about her birth mother. That truth too would come, but for now her sister's safety and the baby's future were her anchor. The cathedral's organ hummed softly, a volunteer testing its keys, and the sound felt like a heartbeat, steady and alive. The bride's sister smiled, her baby reaching for her aunt's veil, a gesture of trust that cracked the bride's composure. She lifted the child, her tiny weight a promise of redemption. "You're free," she whispered, her voice for the baby alone. As the FBI agents cleared the nave, the bride lingered, her mother and sister at her side. She opened her father's notebook one last time, her fingers tracing his final words. A new entry formed in her mind, unwritten but etched in her soul. Dad, we won. Your truth lives. The cathedral's silence was no longer oppressive but sacred, a space for healing to begin. Dear listeners, if this revelation has shaken you, subscribe to our channel for every soul-stirring moment to come. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your voices fuel this journey. The bride's story is far from over, and a new chapter of justice awaits. The morning sun spilled through the wide windows of a modest farmhouse in upstate New York, painting the kitchen in hues of gold and amber. The air carried the scent of fresh coffee and warm cinnamon rolls, a quiet comfort that wrapped the room like a quilt. At the worn oak table, Emily Carter sat surrounded by a sea of case files, her auburn hair tied loosely, her emerald eyes scanning a laptop screen with unwavering focus. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never was, since the cathedral's altar became a stage for justice, and the Blackwell Empire crumbled under the weight of its sins. Yet for Emily, the fight was far from over. It had simply transformed into a mission, one that pulsed through every fiber of her being. Across the table, her sister Anna, now 16, rocked her infant daughter, Lily, in a gentle rhythm. Anna's dark curls framed a face that had shed its haunted pallor, replaced by a quiet strength forged in the fire of her courage. Her sketches, once jagged with fear, now bloomed with soft pastels, a testament to her healing. Lily cooed, her tiny hands grasping at a rattle, her presence a beacon of hope in a family scarred but unbroken. Their mother, Laura, hummed softly as she pulled a tray of rolls from the oven, her graying hair catching the sunlight. The scene was ordinary, yet sacred, a fragile piece carved from the wreckage of betrayal. Emily's laptop pinged, drawing her attention to an email from Rachel Torres, the journalist whose expose had turned the Blackwell scandal into a national reckoning. Another survivor found in Seattle. The subject line read, "She's ready to talk." Emily's heart quickened. Her nonprofit, the Carter Foundation, had reunited 7 families torn apart by Genex Solutions experiments. But dozens more cases lingered, each a thread in the tapestry of pain she was determined to mend. She glanced at Anna, who smiled, sensing her sister's resolve. "Go get her," Anna said, her voice soft but firm, a far cry from the trembling girl who'd faced a cathedral's judgment. The table was littered with headlines, their bold print a chronicle of the past 3 months. Blackwell Empire collapses, biotech scandal rocks nation, FBI raids Genex facilities, survivors demand justice in landmark case. The groom, Matthew Blackwell, and his father, Edward, faced a litany of charges: human trafficking, murder, fraud, ensuring they'd never taste freedom again. But Emily knew their downfall was only the beginning. Genex's network, corrupt officials, complicit doctors, and silent enablers, still lurked in the shadows, and she'd vowed to root them out. Laura set a plate of rolls on the table, her eyes lingering on Emily. "You're pushing too hard," she said, her voice gentle but laced with worry. Emily reached for her mother's hand, the warmth grounding her. "I have to," she said, "for Dad, for Anna, for all of them." Laura nodded, her gaze drifting to a framed photo of James Carter, Emily's father, his crooked smile a reminder of the journalist who died to protect her. The DNA report, revealed in the cathedral, had shattered Emily's understanding of her origins. She was Genex's first success, a child engineered and stolen. Yet James had loved her as his own, his sacrifice the foundation of her fight. Anna shifted Lily to her shoulder, her fingers tracing the baby's soft hair. "I spoke at a rally yesterday," she said, a shy pride in her voice. "People clapped. They listened." Emily's heart swelled. Anna, once overwhelmed by the world's noise, had found her voice, sharing her story to inspire other survivors. Lily, named for their grandmother, was a symbol of resilience, her bright eyes untouched by the darkness of her conception. Emily leaned over, kissing Lily's forehead. "You're changing the world," she told Anna, her voice thick with emotion. The doorbell chimed, and Michael Reed stepped inside, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. The retired FBI investigator carried a thick file, its edges frayed from constant handling. "Got something for you," he said, spreading documents across the table. "Bank records from a Genex shell company, They were funding illegal fertility trials, using the data to sell to Big Pharma. Emily's stomach churned, the scope of the horror ever expanding. She scanned the papers, finding names of young women, some as young as Anna, whose lives had been commodified. "How many?" she asked, her voice low. Michael's jaw tightened. "At least 20 we know of, but there's more." A particular document caught Emily's eye. A hospital record from 1997, the year of her birth. It was her mother, Laura, detailing a pregnancy she'd never spoken of. Emily's breath caught, her eyes meeting Laura's. "Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Is this true?" Laura's hands trembled as she took the paper, her face draining of color. "I thought it was lost," she murmured. "I was told the baby didn't survive." The truth hit like a tidal wave. Emily was that baby, stolen by Genix and adopted back by the man who'd loved Laura enough to search for her child. James had found her, not by chance, but through years of relentless pursuit, his investigation a quest to reclaim his family. Anna gasped, her eyes wide. "You're still my sister," she said, reaching for Emily's hand. Emily squeezed it, tears blurring her vision. "Always," she said, her voice cracking. Laura embraced her, sobbing softly. "He never told me," she whispered. "He wanted you to have a normal life." The revelation was a wound, yet it stitched together the fragments of Emily's identity. She was Genix's creation, but she was also James's daughter, shaped by love, not science. Michael cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "The sentencing's next week," he said. "With this new evidence, they're looking at life. But we need to keep digging. Their network is still out there." Emily nodded, her resolve hardening. She thought of her father's notebook, its final line a mantra. "Truth is the only cure." She'd added her entry last night. "Dad, we're finding them. Your fight lives." The phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "Seattle survivors waiting. Flight booked for tomorrow." Emily stood, gathering her files. "I'm heading out," she said, her voice firm. Anna rose, handing Lily to Laura. "I'm coming," she said, her eyes fierce. "I want to help." Emily hesitated, then nodded, pride swelling in her chest. Together they were unstoppable. As they stepped outside, the rolling hills glowed under a hopeful sky, the farmhouse a haven they'd returned to. Emily paused at her father's old truck, its dented frame a relic of his journeys. She whispered to Lily, cradled in Anna's arms, "We're just getting started." The road ahead was long, but each step was a tribute to James, to Anna, to the survivors waiting to be found. Dear listeners, if this journey of healing and justice has moved you, subscribe to our channel for every inspiring twist. Share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your support carries this story forward. Emily's mission is alive, and the fight for truth has only begun.